Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunchantu satang. So this afternoon you assemble here to reflect on the way it is, the Dhamma. I'm not a teacher. I don't want to teach you anything, but point the way. And that's the basic value of Buddha Dhamma, is like the Four Noble Truths. His first sermon after enlightenment was not a doctrine, not a teaching, but pointing the direction to enlightenment. So even though I'm called Ajahn means teacher, it's just a convention. I don't like to think of myself as a teacher, because then I feel I have to teach people. So in meditation, what we call bhavana in Pali, it's investigating the way it is. So right now, just observe what you're feeling right now as you're sitting here in this Dhamma hall. Just be the watcher, not the judge. It's not judging I'm not suggesting you should be feeling anything, but just be the witness. Each person here in the Dhamma hall about the feeling that you have, the mood, the state of mind you happen to be experiencing. So this is a reflection on the way it is. You can't help the way you feel at this moment. You don't choose feelings, they just come according to conditions. Well, out of ignorance of Dhamma, we tend to identify with our feelings. I feel like this, I feel interested, I'm not interested, or I'm bored, or we want to make judgments about how we're feeling at this moment. Or maybe you think, I don't feel anything. But whatever, not feeling anything is still a words about not being able to identify the experience of here and now. Because the way it is always about here and now. Enlightenment is here and now. Nibbana is here and now. Liberation from suffering is here and now. It's not something in the future or is difficult or something highly attained through hours of meditation. It's through recognizing your true reference, your true abiding place is Dhamma, which is apparent here and now. It's the way it is, whatever mood, whatever state of mind you're in at this time, it changes according to conditions. So when you identify with your mood, then you become someone who's angry or frightened or jealous or hungry. You become a personality that's identified with the way it is now through ignorance. So that we call avijja, or ignorance of the way it is. So the Buddha wasn't really a teacher. He was pointing very directly to the way it is. So when after his enlightenment, when he went to meet his 5 colleagues in Saranath, and the first sermon was, there's suffering, there's a cause, there's the end, and there's a way of non-suffering. So that's not a doctrine. Suffering is not a doctrinal position we take. It's to understand it. Our suffering is very much this realm that we're experiencing through the body. The body is a realm of feelings and suffering and fear and desire that we all experience individually. So looking at my body now that I'm 91 years old, or am I? It's just the body is 91 years old. It's not what I want personally. Everybody wants me to live to 120, but I've had enough, really. At 91, I'm very fortunate. I don't suffer very much. My vision is very poor, so if you've come to greet me, I can only see you when you're up close. I can see, the separation. I can't see any features on faces. So people, out of respect for the Sangha, when they come to see me, they sit very far away and speak in a soft voice. And I can't hear them or see who it is. I used to have 20/20 vision and perfect hearing. But this is the aging process of a human body. It's like this. It's not something to identify with, but to learn from. Old age is like this. It's not, your personality, your ego is formed when you're young. So when you're young, you think old age is far away. But when you're older, you think, I'm surprised to still be alive. So age is about the body. It's not personal. It's not a personal thing. It's the nature of forms. They begin, they are born, they get old and die, they end. And that's the wisdom teaching of the Buddha. All conditions are impermanent. In my own experience, I really registered that all conditions are impermanent. So in my bhavana practice over the years, I began to see, really not just see this in terms of what the Buddha taught or a Buddhist doctrine, but the reality. It's the reality. It's real. All conditions are impermanent. So when the body dies, what happens to the soul or the spirit? When we're identified with the body, we can imagine experience outside of the form that we identify with. So we think, we make up images of heaven, hell, nibbana. Nibbana can be seen as eternal bliss, or we can think just annihilation, oblivion. Everything we think, whether it's oblivion, heaven, hell, or reborn as a deva or an angel in the highest realms, or becoming a Buddha, these are words. like the word Buddha, it's a nice word. It's to me, it's the nicest word we have. But it is a word, it's a sankhara. The word Dhamma is a sankhara. The word Sangha is a sankhara. They arise and they cease. They're created. They're forms in consciousness. You can't sustain them. Like in the Thai forest tradition, we use the mantra Bhutto, the Buddha's name. But no matter how much you repeat the word Bhutto, it has a beginning and ending. So I began to really investigate words, how strongly identify with words, with me as a Buddhist, as a bhikkhu, as a man, with my age, with my appearance. I began to investigate all that I believed in, was taught through my parents, through my social conditioning, by my education, are just words. They taught me I must believe in God. I was brought up as a Christian. So there's God and you must believe in, and then it's always Him. So God has a form, has a gender, and then, it's a sin to disbelieve in God. So the word sin comes into consciousness, and so this has been very much a strong influence in my life, the sense of sin and being wrong, because the judgment is about right and wrong, sin and virtue. The thinking mind is a judging function. If you've got heaven, you've got hell. If you've got God, you've got Satan. You've got male, female, right and wrong, true and false, virtue and vice. Every single word has its opposite, a positive and a negative. Well, all these positive and negative are judgments, are conditions we make on ourselves and on others, on the society we live in. So I began to realize how living in a sangha of monks who some I liked, some I didn't like as a person. And then the ideal of a bhikkhu is I should like everybody equally. I should appreciate their virtues, their interest in Dhamma, and that's being very rational and reasonable about everything. But just noticing the emotions aren't about being reasonable. Emotions are not reasonable, they're feeling, right and wrong, good or bad, angry or happy. So then the Buddha said all conditions are impermanent. So suddenly you realize there's no reality between right and wrong, good and bad, male and female, God and Satan. It's not real. It's contrived. It's artificial. It's made up by human beings. But what we call Dhamma, the word itself is a sankhara, but it pointing to the way it is. When we become the witness to the way it is, then we're in the state of awakened attention to the way it is. All conditions really are impermanent. And a doubt about, is there something permanent? Is consciousness permanent? Is there a permanent soul or spirit essence or karmic essence that gets reborn? And so we hear various explanations, justifications, and rationalizations about this. But it's really very simple, that all that arises, ceases, and is not self. All Dhamma is not personal. So what is impersonal is consciousness, because we don't create it. Sense consciousness is very personal and temporary. So what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, what we feel is always changing. Sankharas are always changing. So that means that what is the witness of change? What is it that witnesses change? Is it Ajahn Sumedho practicing meditation, watching things come and go in his mind? On one conventional level, at how we talk and think and interpret experience. Or is it Buddha, or what is pure consciousness that doesn't begin or end? And of course, we can't find it. You'll never be able to see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or think it. Because that's what you ultimately are. That's what awareness is. Conscious awareness is where you're abiding in the pure consciousness of Dhamma, ultimate reality. And so it's rather than trying to get enlightened as a person, I guarantee nobody's personality ever gets enlightened. You don't become an enlightened person, because the personality is very artificial. No matter how virtuous and pure you try to live, you as a person don't get enlightened. What enlightenment is realizing your true nature, which is impersonal, what we call anatta, no person. Now that pure consciousness is complete, is pure. So your true nature, everyone here in this Dhamma hall, everyone in England, in the world, is the same ultimate consciousness, except they identify with what they're not, their conditioning, their egos, their prejudices, their biases, their views and opinions about right and wrong, good and bad. So that's why, to have the attempts to solve wars in the world, to bring peace to the world. I remember I grew up during the Second World War, and so much of my early experience in childhood was with the American propaganda. And so, we thought at the end of the war, then they had the United Nations meeting, forming the United Nations in San Francisco. And I remember with great hope that where all United Nations would become united and make agreements, fair and just agreements, and really there'd be no more war. I was 11 years old at the time. And that was a hope, because the Second World War was terrible. So, the United Nations is a really good idea, but it is an idea. And so we have wars all over now, in Ukraine, Russia, and Palestine, and Israel, and Sudan, and in African countries, and there was even a conflict between the Thais and the Cambodians recently, and it goes on. And how can we end all these conflicts and have permanent peace? Well, permanent peace is impossible as long as we are identified with conditions that change. There is no such thing as permanent peace in the world. Because it's just not the way it is. The things change. You fall in love with somebody and you think you're going to be in love with them forever. And then after a few years you want to separate. Because the idea of living happily ever after is a beautiful idea. It's ideal, but it's not the way things are. Things change. Relationships change, feelings change, conditions change. So, osape sankarani cha, all conditions are impermanent, and you need to realize this for yourself, not just take it, believe what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is to encourage your own ability to develop your wisdom faculty to see through the illusions you cling to and identify with. Now, this is a very important teaching at this time, because we've got everything, these wise wisdom teachings are now quite available to everyone through the internet, through technology. When I first became a Buddhist in 1955, there was hardly anything in English about Buddhism. Now there's a plethora of books on meditation, Theravada Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, about Vedanta, and on and on. It's wonderful to see in its way, but oftentimes you don't know which book to buy because there's so many choices, so many options. One thing, when you're, as a samana, as a monk or a nun, often we come to this life with our ideals, how things should be. And I remember when I met Luang Por Cha in 1967, I was looking for the ideal teacher and the ideal monastery. And so I thought, when I first met the monks, there were only about 20 monks at the time. I thought they were all perfect arahants. I just assumed that anybody living this life would have realized enlightenment, nibbana by now. And I wanted Luang Por Cha to be perfect for me. This is all about me, what I wanted and expected as an ideal. I wanted Luang Por Cha to be the perfect example of an arahant. I wanted his disciples to be perfect examples of samanas. And the life was very simple and basic, which I quite liked. I personally approved of it. I wanted to understand how to use Vinaya, the discipline. So I was quite open to the whole thing. But within a year, I was totally frustrated because I was having to learn another language. I didn't understand Thai culture or Thai society. I would misinterpret experience. I'd get paranoid thinking, people were laughing at me because Luang Por Chah would sometimes point at me and everybody start laughing. And I take that personally as, why are they laughing at me? In America, that's rude. And and then everybody with a strict Vinaya, they were always on my back, telling me what to do, how to walk, how to carry my bag, how to eat my meal, how to sit. You had to sit with your legs to one side, which was very painful at first. And every time I'd shift into crossing the legs, then some monk would tap me on the shoulder and tell me to sit in this polite posture, Thai polite posture, which we never do in the United States. Never thought of it before. And so I began to just feel oppressed, smothered by the discipline, all the rules, and I began to see that all the monks were not enlightened. So then I was disillusioned because the ideals that I came with brought up my critical mind. I started criticizing and just feeling like I'm suffocated under a blanket of precepts, rules, and monks that are always on my back telling me what to do. So this was a feeling I had, a feeling of being overwhelmed with Vinaya and rules about right and wrong and true and false and good and bad. And I got this idea that we were superior monks to the village monks because we wear these dark robes and they always have this feeling that we're keeping the rules and we're better than they are. So I've developed this sense of a kind of cultish acceptance of we're superior and you can't trust those village monks. And I grew up in a Christian community, high Anglican community, and high church Anglicans are very cultish. They think they're much better than low church Anglicans. So I was brought up, with very cultish experiences about we're superior and we look down on, like in America, it's called the Episcopal Church, the middle and the low, but we're high church. And I noticed how cruel being superior to others is, because high church Anglicans could be very judgmental, cruel and unkind in the way they looked at others that didn't quite fit into their high standards of how an Anglican should be. So I became very much afraid of belonging to something like that when I entered the monastic life. And here I was, that brought up this karmic remembering of superiority to others, like superior to village monasteries or Bangkok monasteries. And I didn't like that feeling. I didn't want to. I could see just feeling superior to other people is not peaceful, because your critical mind just goes very active. You've got to protect your purity at all costs. You've got to make everybody conform to your rules and to keep you pure and superior to the rest. And by verbalizing this in my mind, and observing the impermanence of words and feelings, I began to see how these I'm superior or inferior are just conditions, words that we come from, that are created. They have no reality in themselves. There is no one superior or inferior. So I tried to take the middle way. I'm just an ordinary bhikkhu. I'm not superior. I'm not inferior. I respect all people who try to live the holy life. And that's being very reasonable and fair and proper. But it's still artificial. It's not enlightened awareness. So whether you want to be just one of the boys or just a commoner or we're all equal to each other, these are words that we oftentimes cling to. Maybe ideals like wanting equality among all people is a very nice ideal. Gender equality, racial equality, religious equality, everything's fair and just is ideal. So it's the best you can think, but it's not the way it is. Samsara is not about equality, equity, or fairness. Samsara is changing, and we can't make it stop changing and bend conditioned phenomena to fit our ideals. And ideals change. So you're going to wake up to reality itself, to what is your true nature. And my realization was this conscious awareness, which is not personal. It's not where male and female, good and bad, right and wrong cease. In pure consciousness, there's nothing, the conditions arise and cease. Good ones, bad ones, fair ones, unjust ones. Because that's the way this experience of life in a form is. It's just like this. Getting old is like this. And by reflecting this way, you stop trying to want it to be otherwise, or thinking it's unfair or unjust. You stop thinking as your identity. Because thinking is about right and wrong, good and bad. And that's all. Thinking is an artifice. Pali grammar, Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese, all languages are created. They're sankharas, no matter whether they're holy languages or vulgar languages or primitive languages, they arise and cease like all sankharas. So one day I became so depressed at Wat Pah Pong. I became so just feeling smothered, and it made me incredibly critical of everything. And it was evening puja time, evening chanting, and I didn't go. I went out into the forest and I started swearing all the words that a good bhikkhu should never use. I was in the Navy for 4 years, so I'm really good at swearing. And just by, it's nothing wrong with Wat Pah Pong or Luang Por Cha or the monks, really. They were, I didn't want to leave, but they were changing conditions and it didn't always suit my interpretation of what's right. And so I began to just release this sense of oppression, of just trying to fit in on my personal level to the way I thought everybody wanted me to be. Because that takes a lot of effort to try. When you're a West Coast American, I came from Berkeley, California. This was 1967, and Berkeley, California was the hippies and the pot smokers and follow your heart, do whatever you want, experience everything. That's the kind of society I left behind to live in Wat Pah Pong, a very strict Vinaya monastery. So I'm going from one extreme, where it's complete freedom, follow your heart, whatever it wants to do, to you can't do this, you can't do that. But I still didn't want to leave, but I think the release mechanism, I'm not recommending that you do this, but this is how I dealt with this, the way I was holding it, the way I, out of my personal habit patterns, holding the strict rules and being very idealistic about how things should be. I began to just release the tension. So I went back to the sala where they were chanting, and I felt this sudden real love for the whole life. And I stood outside just listening to the monks chanting, and I just felt so peaceful and felt so full of love for everything, because I was no longer holding ideals or demands or views or opinions. Somehow I'd released myself from these kind of tension-holding experiences to just being. And the Pali chanting was very beautiful, the way the Thais do it, and then I went back and I could really begin to enjoy the life of a Theravada and Thai forest monk. So one of the forms of desire that is most deluding is called vipavaddanha, the desire to get rid of things. To get rid of fear, to get rid of greed and lust, and get rid of jealousy. So this was the idea of wanting to get rid of my defilements. I saw myself as a defiled person, and I wanted to get rid of them. I suffered from jealousy. And I didn't like to be jealous. I didn't want to be a jealous person, so I was trying to get rid of it. Trying to get rid of fear. Because my generation of Americans, we are brought up with the ideal of, the really tough male who never is frightened of anything, Superman kind of images from childhood. And so you had this idea that you're a weak male if you're experiencing fear, so you wanted to get rid of it. These early conditioning, it affects us our whole life if we're not aware of it. How the views and opinions, the perceptions we formed when we were innocent, open-minded children. Like when a new baby is born, it's totally innocent. It's conscious, but it doesn't have memory, doesn't have a name. Then the father name it, and say you're a boy or a girl, and you're English or Thai or American. You form a sense of your identities through knowledge acquired from others, from your parents, from your brothers and sisters, your society. So now, the conventions, the idea of being American or male or bhikkhu or that, I realize are mere conventions. They're not what I am. Not ultimately real. They're just acquired perceptions that I didn't ask for. They were just given to me. When you're a child, you're innocent, so you just soak up whatever comes at you at the time. So Vipawadana, desire to get rid of sin or defilements or jealousy or fear. That's ego. That's my ego wanting to get rid of fear, not wanting to be jealous, wanting to be pure, not have any sexual feelings, wanting to no longer have defilements, wanting to just get rid of them all, hoping that I could do that. And then through mindfulness and through wisdom, you find out you can't really. Because the nature of the human body, it's a condition itself. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, the brain is condition, it's phenomenal. And it's not ideal. It's not, so many disabled people and babies born that are disfigured or whatever. It's not fair. Being brought up as a Christian, I used to wonder, why does God allow people to be born deformed? It's not fair. And it's not fair, but that's the way it is. It's the sankhara, the changing conditions of phenomena are like that. They're not always fair or just or good or right. So Vipawadana, or desire to get rid of things, I had insight early on in monastic life that was my middle name, Vipawadana. I wanted control of my life and get rid of what I didn't like and become what I idealized. And I could see, through investigating the ego, I want to become a pure bhikkhu, are words. It's not bad, but it is a creation that my personality, my ego wants to become pure, wants to get enlightened. And just by observing that, being the Bhutto, the witness to the way it is, I want to become enlightened. You know, you can say, well, I shouldn't think like that. Or, that's my goal in life, is to become enlightened. I'm dedicating my life as a Buddhist monk to become enlightened. The world needs more enlightened people. Well, it does. but, you know, can those words really, you know, they come from artifices, from sankharas. So then I had a very powerful experience of realizing the silence behind the words, which goes unnoticed, is not created. I call this the sound of silence. Silence is here and now. It's not a creation by humanity, but it's reality. It's not a sankhara. So enlightenment means abiding in pure conscious awareness, which is here and now. It's timeless. It's not about time. Sankharas are all about time. And then I realized in the sequence of consciousness, space, earth, fire, water, and air, the elements, you know, just reflecting. If there was no consciousness, how could there be space? If it was just personal confidence, we live in space. So space is something that comes into consciousness. Otherwise, there could be no forms. If there were no space, then there's no forms can arise in a spaceless reality. But because there is consciousness here and now, then space, earth, fire, water, and air are forms manifest in space. And we identify, cling to these illusions that are created, that are impermanent, that are unsatisfactory. And that's why the suffering of the world is like this. There has to be wars as long identified with nationality. You know, creating lines where this is my nation and your nation's over there. That's artificial. So there's going to be war if you're like impinging on my borders. We're going to fight you. And this is because of the identity with my country, my nationality, my space. It's all illusion. It's not reality at all. Where the Buddha was pointing to ultimate reality. And so the third noble truth is the end of suffering, nirodha, which is here and now, timeless. It's peace, it's perfect peace. So that is your true nature, whether you realize it or not. If you just let go of perceptions and things that you're attached to, is more or less not getting rid of them, but no longer identifying with them. On a conventional sense, in this tradition, Theravada tradition, I'm a Buddhist monk, I'm a bhikkhu, that's convention. which is impermanent in itself. When we attach to the conventions, then we're bound into that world of suffering, despair, anguish, regret, guilt, remorse, all that makes life miserable. So I offer this as a reflection for this afternoon.